If you've ever felt shoulder pain when you're bench pressing, you're not alone. Today we're going to break down some of the reasons that this may be occurring. But first of all, we need to establish what sort of pain we're talking about, because there are the normal pains that you get during training. The DOMS, the muscle soreness, the lactic acid buildup, that pumpy feeling, the deep stretch sensation, the burning feeling. These are all to be expected at some point during or after training with weights. But what we're talking about is those more niggly pains, those more sharp pains, those kind of warning signs that we're getting from the nervous system that telling us that something just isn't right. And while today we're exploring the biomechanical considerations of the bench press, it's important to realise that pain is so multifaceted and there's so many influences. So if you're blaming your pain solely on one exercise, it's an incredibly short-sighted way of looking at it and you're not considering the bigger picture. Right, without further delay, let's get started. So first, let's look at range of motion. You always hear that the bar should touch your chest during a bench press, but is this necessarily true? If I test my range of motion, then you can see that I could quite comfortably get into an amount of shoulder extension that would allow me to have the bar touch my chest. However, if I had a shallow rib cage and long arms, then I'd need much more range of motion at my shoulder to achieve this. So this is why we test, and once you know your active range of motion, it's probably best that you're not exceeding that during the exercise. And that may mean that the bar isn't touching your chest, but that's not a problem. Unless you're benching to compete in a powerlifting competition, it doesn't matter. Now you can potentially improve this range of motion at the shoulder, but that's for another video. Today we just want to look at working with what you have got right now and making the best of what you can do right now. So once we've checked our shoulder extension, it's important to move on to the other ranges of motion that we need. So the wrist is going to be pretty important here. We do require enough pronation and extension of the wrist to even grab the bar in that position. And sometimes, depending on your grip, you're going to require a degree of ulnar deviation as well. So it's worth checking all these things, because ultimately, if there's an issue at one joint and we're exceeding the range of motion there, it could then travel up and compensate the chain to the next joint and beyond. So a wrist thing could essentially become an elbow or a shoulder thing too. So if you're struggling with any of these wrist movements and they feel limited in some way, shape or form and you're not getting into the position you'd need to be in to grab the bar, then something like a Swiss bar with a more neutral grip might be a better option. Or simply changing to a dumbbell chest press where there's a lot more freedom in terms of these positions might work better for you. Anyway, assuming that's all good, you want to line up on the bench with your eyes behind the bar. This will get you into the ideal starting position. Grip width wise, if you go too wide, you're going to put a lot of strain on the biceps. If you go too narrow, there's going to be a lot of strain in the triceps. A position where your wrists are roughly stacked over your elbows or just slightly inwards is probably about right for most situations. When you lay back on the bench and start doing the movement, if you start shooting your shoulders forward each time you push the bar back up, then guess what? You're going to feel it in your shoulders. Whatever the highest point is here is going to be doing most of the work. So if your shoulders shoot in front of your chest, then they're going to be working the most. But if we raise that chest up and we make sure it stays up throughout the movement, we're going to feel it more in the right areas. Arching your back is usually fine as long as it doesn't cause any lower back pain, and again, if you've got that range of motion available. That's going to promote your chest being up nice and high and going to promote you using the right muscles here. And as you lower the barbell, if you take a big deep breath at the bottom of the movement, this is going to expand your rib cage and again give those pecs more internal leverage to help you press the bar back up. Something to be careful of is your bar path and your elbow position throughout. If your elbows flare and the bar comes down like a guillotine, then you'll likely feel it in your shoulders. So what I do is I imagine I'm trying to bend the bar in half, which automatically tucks my elbows and it gets my lats locked in, as they play a major role as one of the antagonist muscles here. An important thing to note is to never think of movements as simply for one or two muscles. As Tom Purvis says, everyone's on the team, but just some guys have the ball. When it comes to performing your reps, we want to see control, which usually means a slower tempo. We want to see solid starts and stops at either end of the rep, and then everything that shouldn't be moving should be staying still throughout the rep. This form should be standardized for the most part. Granted, sometimes when you're pushing hard, you may sacrifice a bit of form at times. However, this video is about shoulder pain, and if your goal is to fix that, then you may have to strip back to a load where you can nail your form and your body can tolerate that load and overall volume. Speaking of tolerance, you have to consider your total overall volume on the main muscles involved in this movement throughout your entire training program. A huge increase in volume or load on these body parts could be enough to lead to the warning signs from your body that you're overreaching. And finally, it wouldn't be right to do this video without mentioning strength profiles and resistance profiles. In a pressing movement, we're going to be weak at the bottom and strong at the top. This would be the strength profile, weak to strong. However, the resistance profile of this exercise is steady because the weight doesn't change throughout. The only caveat to this would be if you performed your eccentric at a really fast pace. This would essentially change the profile, meaning that the weight would get a lot heavier at the bottom, because force equals mass times acceleration. Anyway, the overall magnitude of the exercise is that it's heavy at the bottom and light at the top. meaning that there's potential that your muscles can't tolerate that increase in demand at the bottom. And this is where you'd see people using a reverse band to offload at the bottom of the movement and slow down the acceleration. Banding isn't something that I do personally very often, but again, when there is a pain issue, if this alleviates it, then it could be a good option to try out. So check these things out, test your active range of motion, see what you've got available, make sure you're not exceeding that during the exercise, and if you've not got the ranges to do this exercise, look at one of the alternatives. Look at using the Swiss bar, look at using the reverse banded version, and see if that works any better for you. Leave me a comment and let me know if any of this stuff helped you out and helped you keep benching for your shoulder issues.